I think we all kind of knew it was higher. We just hoped it wasn't higher, and we can no longer sit there and have wishful thinking. We just need to redirect the limited resources that's going to be made available to us and get them to the most vulnerable youth. And
you know, there's a perception of those who don't follow the county office that somehow it oversees all the districts in the county.
Right.
And it is primarily a service provider with some oversight responsibilities. So, and so now that we're facing some cutbacks in schools, and I'd be curious as to, I don't know whether how it's going to affect the county office, but I wonder then if you could talk about, you know, specifically given the constraints, what should the office's priorities be? What should your Dr. Weiss's priorities be that you would give him as a board? Gary, why don't you start?
Well, sure. You're right, John. There's a legal obligation that the board has, or the county superintendent has. It's actually not the board's responsibility, to be clear about that. But the county superintendent does have responsibility to approve all budgets, and it's an oversight role that they play under AB 1200. And in that role, they need to assure that that local districts have met certain requirements for reserves, that they've been prudent about planning ahead. Listen, I think that that's going to be a very difficult role this year. It could be that local boards are declaring that that they may not have necessary reserves, and it's called a qualified budget. They may actually have what's called a negative budget, which is submit something that says that we are going to have problems. That has happened in the past and may happen again. Then the role becomes one of consultant. There is an opportunity for the superintendent with the staff to work more closely to resolve some of those issues. That's sort of the oversight role. It's the legal role, but there's something bigger than that. I think the county superintendent, along with all of the superintendents, has the opportunity to look at ways that we can work together. There is redundancy that we have. There is opportunity. We may have a chance here in a minute to talk about special ed, for instance. Special ed is an enormous cost to local districts, the encroachment. And to find ways to work together, if all hands join together, that we might find ways to save some money. So, listen, I think there's an opportunity, again, for the school community here to come together and to sort of think outside the box.
Yeah. Well, as Gary said, special education is a federally mandated program, and it's an unfunded mandate, and it has been one since 1975. And that therein is the problem, because the feds, up until they've paid roughly 20% of the cost of special education, and the districts, the local districts, are left to foot the rest of the bill. And it's not a question of saying, do these children deserve the services? They need to have the services. So local school districts are more or less on the hook to provide the services without having the income. So I think the real problem that's going to reside is that we are going to have probably mid-year cutbacks, reductions. It's just, I don't think there's any way of getting around it, because the state budget is in severe stress. I was driving around the other day, and good old Arnold was on the radio, and he was saying that the state needs to, they're going to sell about $4 billion worth of short-term bond notes, which the state needs, because now all of a sudden they've decided, the budget they put together 72 days late was not a good budget, but that's, and then we had this horrible global economic meltdown that we've experienced, and that's affected, everybody. So with the state having to say we need to float more bonds, we're going to have at least another $3 billion shortfall by the end of the year. You just hope that maybe things will get a little bit better, but I don't think we can build budgets on hope. And in terms of special ed, it's very difficult, I think, to cut back the special ed programs because they are mandated. And I know when I looked at the county's budget, they have quite a number of classified staff, which I imagine a number of them are taking care of instructional aides, dealing with the severely handicapped students. And so, where do you cut? It's just, there's not a whole lot of room to cut when you have unfunded mandated programs that, and parents of these children, are going to be strong advocates, as they should be. So somehow, like Gary said, maybe we can find some kind of of, you know, we can minimize some of, we can maybe perhaps bring more services together in one area and kind of reduce some of the costs without, you know, reducing the services, because, you know, that's going to be critical that we provide these services for these children.
Joseph?
John, you asked about priorities in this time of fiscal constraints. And there are two things the county office could do, is to ensure the quality of their programs to the direct service students that currently exist in the county programs. They serve about 2,900 youth in alternative schools and special schools, and about 2,000, a little over 2,000 in Head Start. You went to the PACT Forum, I saw you at the PACT Forum, and the people acting in community together were concerned about the fact that the county students, that they're out of compliance to those students in alternative schools that are non-English speakers, that they don't have any self-testing. So California English Language Development Test. One of the things we could do, even in these times of fiscal constraints, to give the best quality of services to our own students. That's one. Two is, one of the priorities of Dr. Weiss is to make sure that the services that the county provides to school districts are of a higher quality, that the school districts feel the county is meeting their needs. And I agree with Gary, we need to do this collaboratively. And if we have redundant services, not have those any longer. And that takes strong collaboration, again, from the county superintendent, with some policy setting by the county board, and maybe some budget prioritization by the county board. The other thing that needs to be done as a priority in these times of fiscal constraints is attracting the best teachers to this county. And so one of the roles of the county office, we have the biggest recruitment fair in Northern California. The county office puts it on. We need to figure out a way how to attract the highest quality of teachers and to raise the stature of the teaching profession in this county, so that when you're a college student or a community college student or a high school student, if you have a public relations campaign about teaching, because it's a great profession to go into, but when you talk to people about teaching, oh, no, I don't want to be a teacher. We need to raise the stature of the teaching profession so more people would want to go into it, and we grow our own teachers from the county pool that we have.
So through the last question, we talked a little bit about roles and responsibilities between the County Office of Ed and the districts, about collaboration and programs that you could do jointly. What is your view, starting with you, Carol, of No Child Left Behind, and where do you see the County Office of Ed fitting in? And then beyond that, what do you think that the County Office of Ed can do to improve underperforming schools in the district?
The No Child Left Behind, hopefully the Congress will be able to modify it, because it truly has become, I think, very difficult for school districts to implement. We call it No Teacher Left Standing, because California has one set of testing and the feds have another, and they simply don't, you know, mesh very well together. So somehow this No Child Left Behind. Now, the county, I know, when schools go on a PI status, program improvement, they will, as districts contract with the county, and they will come out and provide services, and that's fine. And this is, again, part of this No Child Left Behind. It's just going to become increasingly difficult, I think, for school districts, particularly the testing measures are now going to be upped in another year, so districts that weren't making, you know, the targets are now even going to be further behind. So like one of these seminars I went to, it was the Algebra Summit. They said, well, pretty soon, you know, we'll have all school districts in PI status, which is not, I think, what we want. But they're almost saying, well, if you go in PI status, then maybe we'll get you some extra money, and, you know, that's just not going to work. So I think, again, in terms of the dropout, or closing the achievement gap, that's something that I've studied for quite some time, and it's obvious that you need to look at the data, and it needs to be accurate data. It can't just be taking one subgroup and then matching it against another subgroup, and you're not looking at economically disadvantaged, because you've got to compare the economically disadvantaged, because not all Hispanic surname children or families are poor. There's some that are very middle class, upper middle class. So I mean, so I hate to say when they just take Hispanic and then they benchmark it against whites, and then they say, oh, we're closing the achievement gap. I don't think you are, because you need to look at the economically disadvantaged. They're the ones that tell you the true picture. So the No Child Left Behind is still with us, and it's a major problem for school districts and for teachers, because teachers that are trapped in those schools, if you want to say that, that are trying their best to raise test scores